Happy Friday, ambitious readers. Welcome to the most ambitious edition of Reading Ambitiously we've ever done. We've got a lot to cover, so let's jump into this week's big idea, which is building the Reading Ambitiously operating system powered by AI agents. And we are going to cover a lot, and we are going to focus on how I'm using AI to help empower this community and this newsletter every single Friday. And we're going to do it by focusing on 5 things. I'm going to show you how in 2026 you can get started with Claude Code and how I've set up Claude Code on my personal desktop here and a couple of best practices, tips, and tricks. We're going to talk about some of the primitives of vibe coding and how important context is. And I'm just going to make that point and give you some evidence of how important good inputs are to great outputs when building a system with AI. Third, we're going to talk about actually designing that system. You are the architect of that system. And while that might sound primitive to my software engineering friends, it is so important to understand the very fundamentals of the system that you are architecting so that you can explain them to AI. And finally, I'm going to give you a demonstration of the Reading Ambitiously operating system, which is powered today by 5 agents and is hopefully going to compress the amount of time it takes me to build this newsletter every week and give me more time back to focus on what I think the most valuable part of what I do is, which is the tasteful selection of what goes into this content and why it matters. So let's go ahead and get started first with how I've set up Claude Code. On the left-hand side, I've got Claude Code running in my Mac's terminal window. And on the right-hand side, I've got a fresh copy of VS Code running, which is an open source AI code editor. I think it can be helpful because on the right-hand side, you're able to visualize a little bit more of what can be sometimes intimidating on the left-hand side with the terminal. And so what I've asked Claude Code here to do is just give me an understanding of the application that we're building and the underlying file structure of the project, which is literally just a folder on my computer's desktop. And so here you see the file structure of our application. On the right-hand side, you're seeing the exact same thing. And just to make the point that these applications that are full stack are assembled, and I think it's a way to kind of see that visually and see the components that make that up with VS Code. And so I find it to be helpful to have both of these things open right next to each other when you're working with Claude Code. The second thing is that when you're approaching a new project, the context is king. The better the inputs are, the greater the outputs are going to be. And I think one way to think about that is to think about a car. Claude sort of knows what a car is, but it doesn't understand it well enough and the features that make up the car to be able to build those things. You've got to explain in excruciating detail the features of the system that you're designing, because what ultimately makes up the car is feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, feature 4, feature 5, feature 6. That's what comes together to make up the car. And when it comes to this part of the process, it is really important to spend a lot of time planning. And maybe you've heard about concepts like PRDs or product requirements documents or spec documents or a plan. They're all the same thing. The more time that you spend explaining to Claude in excruciating detail what you want to build, the better the output is going to be from Claude. And the best way to do that is enter into planning mode with Claude. So if I type /plan, I go into planning mode. And if I say, I am getting ready to work on a new feature where I want to do multi-file upload, what you're essentially doing here, think about this as like you're having a conversation with your favorite LLM, like ChatGPT or Claude, where you're just basically talking to Claude about how you're going to come up with a plan to create this new feature. And that's what Claude is working through right now. I like to use the Ask Me tool to interview me to understand more about how we might approach building this feature. This is a tool that Anthropic released where then Claude is actually going to interview me and it's going to ask me question after question until I feel ready with the plan to just keep dialing in the specificity of the plan. I find this to be really helpful to kind of iterate a ton at this stage here to make sure that you get this right. So now here's the Ask Me feature where Claude is asking me, some questions here, some follow-up questions. Do I want to process all the images in parallel? Do I want to do them sequentially? Do I want to upload them all and then let the user choose how to process? And, I kind of come through here and make some selections. I can decide, how many files or what the file limit is, the preview UI. Ultimately, what I want to do is I'm going to get interviewed quite a bit here, and then I'm going to submit my answers to Claude. Claude's going to go back and keep refining that plan, And that's one of the most important parts of the process. And you really want to dial in these PRDs and these specs so that Claude understands what you're building. And when it comes to what you're building, you really got to be good at system design. I mean, for my software engineer friends, you're probably laughing because, a person like me who's not historically been a software engineer is suddenly the architect of one of these systems. But in order to be a good architect, you got to understand the primitives of the system. And so reading ambitiously is a good thing to take a look at. If we come over to the first edition of Reading Ambitiously, it was very simple. And most products start out very simple. This was just me a couple of years ago posting some text to an internal Atlassian blog. Maybe there was a screenshot or two or some quotes, but I'm telling you, this was a fairly simple initial product that we launched. If you look at Reading Ambitiously last week, which is the 97th edition that we've done, it has become way more complex. And it's got major feature sets like a video component, like the best of the rest section, charts that caught my eye, tweets that stopped my scroll, podcasts that you should listen to at 1x. These are all major feature sets, and some of our readers actually go to certain feature sets first. And so they've sort of taken on a life of their own. And the underlying system that I have built to put this thing together every week has also become complex. And that's what this looks like. And so I want to orient you to the left-hand side because these are the inputs, right? And every single week, I'm having dozens of conversations with people. I'm reviewing 40 or 50 different email newsletters. I'm looking at Twitter and X and the hundreds of people that I follow there and looking at podcasts on YouTube and the 11,000 plus people in our LinkedIn community. Like, there are an incredible amount of inputs that drive the ultimate content that becomes an edition of Reading Ambitiously. And where I think it's interesting is like the real value that I feel I provide as the author is the curation of the content. It's the tasteful selection of what the content and why that content matters. Like, I want to spend most of my time thinking through what our readers need to know and the power of those ideas. But this is a fairly tedious part of assembling the newsletter every single week. And I'm spending a lot of my nights working on it to make this thing great for you every single week. So when it came time to build out the Reading Ambitiously OS, I spent an incredible amount of time with Claude in the planning process, building out the PRD. And you should too, if you are going to build anything with AI. And that's what this looks like. The PRD itself is a master PRD that has an extensive table of contents explaining what we are building and the vision and the mission and who it's for and the personas of the product, all the way down to the architectural choices, the specific features we're building, the agents that we're going to build. The more time that you spend really nailing these PRDs, the better the output is going to be. And that is what makes system design so important. So once we had that, then we were able to start building with Claude. And the first thing that we built was what I call the universal inbox. And this is an important lesson learned because I like to think you're driving into the future in the rear view mirror. And that makes a lot of sense to me because version 1 of this is pretty UI intensive, and it exists the way that I currently categorize content by sort of selecting the different folders that this content could be a part of. And if, for example, this news that came in from Amazon this morning is an important piece of content, I come over here, best of the rest, I can process with AI. The agent that's working in the background here starts to understand what this article is all about, and it generates the content that could potentially become a part of the newsletter. Same thing with charts and tweets, which the system actually has the ability to accept JPEGs and PNGs and GIFs. And this was like version 1 of the Reading Ambitiously operating system. Then I thought to myself, wait a second, the AI is probably way better than me at categorizing this stuff. And so I created the next version of this, which is the auto assembly, which is powered by AI agents. And what this does is the AI agents, they first classify the content using instructions. So in this case, AI already thinks in a couple of seconds, this is a chart, and they're 90% sure about that. And then it categorizes the content, and then it processes the content. And it comes up with the first version of what potentially the why it matters is. I think this is pretty amazing. And it only gets better. I feel like the big lesson learned here was the more and more that I built, the more agentic that the system became. And so this is the current version that we have right now, where when you log in, instead of looking at the primitives of the inbox, now I'm just getting an update from my ambitious operating system, which is the main agent running all the other agents, kind of where we are at on the current edition. And I can talk to this thing. So, hey, how's the current edition looking? And now I'm in like a completely autonomous sort of world here where editor-in-chief of Reading Ambitiously already has a pretty solid understanding of the current edition and where I need to spend some time, and starts to ask me how I'm feeling about which sections need work. And let's make a plan to get this newsletter done. And I can work with my AmbitiousOS, who can then orchestrate the other agents to start building this thing out. And what those agents look like. So we've got now a best of the rest agent, a charting agent, a tweet agent, a podcast agent. Each of these agents have a custom set of instructions and a custom set of skills. And, they're all being powered by this AmbitiousOS. Now, this is saving me an incredible amount of time by helping me do the most drudgerous parts of this newsletter. But what it is not doing is what at least I consider to be the most important part I do as the newsletter's author and curator. And that is explaining to you why this stuff matters and tastefully selecting it and giving you the power of these ideas. And that's what I'm doing here. I've opened up a piece of content that we've categorized and orchestrated. And what I'm going to do is spend my time doing what I love doing, which is explaining why this content matters. And on the right-hand side, I've got the AmbitiousOS right here. I can say, I am really long systems of record. It's no surprise to me that Anthropic and OpenAI are buying Salesforce and Workday to power their businesses. These are strong moats because they have ground truth. I think this is a really important, powerful idea. I can tell the AI that that's how I want to refine the content. I can do what I perceive to be my most important role in this thing. I can say, yeah, let's use this revised version, and we're all done and ready to go. Copy edited with great grammar. I can copy that. I can load that directly into Substack. It's pretty incredible. And I think this is just the beginning of how we're all going to use agentic AI to help build personalized software. I heard somebody say that last year was the year of agents, and maybe this is the year of personal assistants. Well, on a project like this is an assistant that's going to save me literally hours a week that I can then repurpose to the most important thing, which is the power of the big idea itself. And I learned a lot of lessons that I hope are easy for you to follow along, like how to set up Claude Code and how to set up VS Code so you can kind of see what's going on as you develop software, and the importance of context and really good inputs so that you do the planning process to drive great outputs, and some of the basic primitives of good system architecture. I mean, you really got to understand the primitives of what you're building. Ultimately, as you're building it, I think driving into the future in the rearview mirror is a very good way to think about it, because my system became more agentic as I went. It was first inbox file hierarchically driven, then it was AI driven, and now it's AI native. And as one of my friends who saw an early version of this said, perhaps there will not be a UI in the final version of this product. And I think they're probably right. So it is a new world. And I challenge you to go out and learn how to use these tools. They are fun to use. I'm here to be a resource for you. And I look forward to being with you every single week in 2026. It is going to be an exciting year for Reading Ambitiously's community. Appreciate you all so much. I hope you all take care of each other. Have a great rest of your week.